Well, getting married is a very exciting time for most couples. However, once the honeymoon period is over and real life kicks in, marriages often run into relationship difficulties. Our guests today have some advice to share on this topic. We're joined by Brad and Marilyn Rhoades. Brad is a former lawyer and now a marriage pastor, while Marilyn is a former counselor. And together they have authored the book called The Grace of Marriage. They join me now from Kentucky. Welcome to Bridge City News, Brad and Marilyn. Great to have you on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so it sounds like you guys are the best people to go to for some marriage advice here. So first off, what sparked you to write this book and what makes it different from other marriage books that are out there?
Well, I would say what sparked us to write is just the need for people to build their marriage on the foundation of the grace and forgiveness of Jesus. Because we've seen, we know personally, and everybody we know, everybody struggles at some level. And if grace and forgiveness isn't primary, one person's struggle is going to derail the marriage. And then it's on a roller coaster based on how well both parties are doing. But the foundation of the grace of Jesus is solid, it's consistent, and it's never changing. It allows your marriage to be solid and stable and grow through all seasons.
Well, as you mentioned, until you get married, and then, the courting and the dateship can be great, but then often once we get married, that's when the problems start. And that's because we see each other close up, and none of us are perfect. We've got this flesh we're still battling. And so when we got married, yes, the honeymoon was over before the honeymoon was over.
Our first fight was at our wedding reception.
Yes.
So yeah, we did. Yeah, it's like we didn't have any fights in dating. Then the wedding reception, grouchy, irritable Brad decided to show up for the first time. So and she didn't like that guy as much as the guy she dated. So.
Yes, and we just naturally fall into this. We just think marriage should be easy, and we think it shouldn't be work, but we realize everything else in life is work. But then we're just floored when it's not just going along smoothly. And that was how our first year kind of started, because we get in this, performance-based trap. And that's why we talk about grace-based versus a performance-based marriage. But we were on a roller coaster. I was getting my counseling degree and thinking, if I don't tell him everything he's doing to bother me, he won't know, and we'll get in these bad patterns. And I had these huge expectations of him, and he wasn't delivering on those expectations.
I made it easy for her not to rely on me.
He was building a law practice. I was crying a lot, and it was a roller coaster, because my joy was based on how good or not good I thought he was meeting my expectations, or how he was treating me. And it was really a train wreck. And about a year in, the Lord showed me that I'm your hope, not Brad. And it's not about what he can do for you. It's about, what am I calling you to in marriage? So I think that's a huge piece of getting grace is, okay, while I was a sinner, Christ died for me. And that's how I'm called to love my spouse, not what they can do for me.
That's amazing. You had mentioned there, Marilyn, the contrast, so that performance-based and grace-based marriages. So how would you contrast those two, maybe? What's the difference?
A performance-based marriage is really dependent on the performance of both parties. So if like, say I'm cold, say I'm stressed at work, having a hard day, and I come home and I'm distant and detached. In a performance-based marriage, Miriam withdraws from me. She's not nice to me. She's like, if you're going to treat me that way, I'm just going to withdraw from you or give you a consequence. Like, how she treats me is dependent on how I'm doing day to day. And so it's based on performance. In a grace-based marriage, it's just, I love you. I love you when you do well. I love you when you don't do well. I love you when you're struggling. I love you when you're thriving. And my love and kindness and pursuit and desire for you, it doesn't go up and down based upon your day, because it's based on the grace of Jesus. And I offer my love to you as a free gift of grace, not as a reward for what you did or didn't do. Now, we make it real clear that doesn't mean tolerating abuse or infidelity. Protection needs to be primary there. But in the day-to-day struggles, it's just, we're going to take a posture of pursuit not a posture not an offense mentality, but a rescue mentality. So if I'm if I had a hard day and came home and was just a little withdrawn, Marilyn get upset at me, withdraw from me. When we got Grace, I come home stressed and withdrawn. She pursues me. She's kind to me. She loves me.
Well, and the difference between a performance-based and a grace-based, you just get over things so much faster because we're still going to struggle, but you can struggle and the next day you laugh about it. Where before in a performance-based, you start struggling, you're going to struggle long because you're going to distance yourself and then you're probably not going to come together physically and that's going to create more distance. And then you can go weeks where you're struggling with each other, where when you get grace, you can.
Yeah, most couples live with a low level of annoyance or animosity that just kind of lives in that marriage. And a grace-based approach is the only way to kill that frustration, to kill that animosity, to kill that kind of, we're both kind of annoyed deal that's going on in a lot of marriages.
Mm-hmm. And it really is kind of loving the other person, right? Because love is kind of an action, right? It's not about how you treat me first and about how I feel today or how you feel today. That's a great example, absolutely. Now, in your book, you do write about your amazing courtship and engagement, but then things shifted to a very different picture of your first year of marriage, as you were just kind of explaining a little bit. So do you want to dive into that a little bit more as well?
You want to?
Well, I pursued Marilyn hard in dating. I mean, at one point went out on a date 24 nights in a row. I mean, I'm a compulsive guy. So, but as soon as we got married, literally Marilyn says like the fire hose got shut off. You know, it was like romantic Brad disappeared and budget man showed up in the house.
You were probably exhausted.
Yeah, it's like, no, but she's like, I kind of had an expectation of marriage based upon how I treated and pursued her in dating.
Absolutely.
And I made the mistake a lot of people make, that when marriage occurs, the pursuit's over. And marriage should be a lifetime pursuit, a lifetime of growth. And I just kind of thought, we're crazy about each other. We had great dating. We really mesh. We'll get married and we'll just be fine. It'll be great. And then I took my foot off the gas pedal and man, the car stopped quick. I mean, went from her favorite person to her least favorite person in about 6 months. And it's just because I went from trying to be super kind to just not paying attention to her. Mm-hmm. Would you add anything to that, babe?
No. And a lot of sports. We came from such different backgrounds, and him from a huge sports family and me not at all. And, early on I was fighting to get him not to watch sports. He was fighting to watch as much sports as possible. And then when we got Grace, he's trying not to do so much sport, and I'm trying to encourage him to go to an event. I mean, it's just moving from that.
She would when I got home, she would try to like keep me from the couch and keep TSPN off. It's like, it's like, can I divert him on a walk? And I was like, it's like somehow strategizing to keep me, because once I lock in, I was kind of gone for the night.
Yes. So it's the grace piece. And then too, we talk about the intentionality piece was a huge shift too. We knew that, okay, marriage just doesn't happen. Everything in life that matters, it takes intentionality to thrive. And our marriages are no exception.
And we challenge people in the book. Look, you're living with somebody every day. It just makes sense to make it fun and to make it good. And just to settle into some boring functional coexistence, it's not God's best, and it's just not good. So if you've got something that's important in marriage, date, invest money, enjoy one another, prioritize the physical relationship. We find so many couples don't have a growth mentality in marriage. They just find this norm they can tolerate, sit in it, and do their life there. And that's just, we've learned it's so much better than that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious how you came about learning that. I mean, let's face it, life can be stressful, marriage can be stressful. We all have these busy schedules and pressures of jobs and not to mention personal preferences, like you were saying, sports versus not. And all of this can obviously create that major discord for couples. So what are some practical ways that people can maybe alleviate some of those stressors?
Yeah. Outside our relationship with Christ, and that's really the fuel to be able to extend grace. But other than our personal walk with the Lord, the number one best thing we do for our marriage is go on a date once a week. Once we got through that first hard season, we had couples telling us, you've got to make time for your marriage. And we started going on a date and prioritizing our marriage, because life will squeeze it out. activities, like you said, life's busy. Our technology will squeeze out the relationship. I mean, crisis in life, hard things that hit, but through all of that, we have 5 children, so that keeps you a little busy. But before we had kids, we started going on a date on a weekly basis, and investing in that time and continuing in that path has been huge for our relationship.
Yeah, it's kind of spending time together in marriage is kind of like going to the gym for your health. I mean, if you do it on a consistent basis, you tend to be pretty healthy. If you don't, you tend not to be. So couples that really make time for their marriage and spend significant time undistracted alone, they do pretty well. And those that don't. And all our dates aren't pretty at all. It's just a commitment. We love each other. We love our marriage. Good date, bad date, sad date, cry date, whatever date, we're going to spend time together every single week. And if couples will do that, it will pay off in their marriage. Scripture talks about sowing and reaping. It's a real deal.
Yeah. And a bad date is better than no date. That's one thing we like to say.
It is better than no date, even if it doesn't feel like it, you know.
Well, it's kind of like our relationship with the Lord. You have quiet times. Sometimes you walk away and you don't feel like it had an impact, but it's the long haul relationship with the Lord. You're just growing in that relationship over time, and it's the same with dating. And it's okay to miss kids' events. It's okay we're in such a child-centered culture, and it's actually a good example to them for them to see our parents are going on a date, and it's okay if we miss something because it shows them the world doesn't revolve around them. So
you know what? Yeah.
Actually,
Yes, you're right. I do find that there are a lot of families that do get stuck in that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. It's true. It's okay for parents to focus on each other instead of the kids all the time. Now, you also talked about like some couples feeling a bit stuck. So what would your advice be to help them get on a path of growth instead of that?
If you're stuck, you have to do something different to get unstuck. So if a car's stuck in the mud and you just keep hitting the gas, it just stays stuck. Something different has to occur to get it to unstuck, whether it's a tow truck, whether it's a push, whatever it would be. So start investing in your marriage and just commit to being unstuck. We're going to date more. We're going to have more fun activities. We're going to prioritize the physical relationship more. We're not okay being stuck. So we're going to work together to cast a vision that's a marriage that's moving forward consistently over time, not a marriage that we're just okay where we are. So when we find the couples that stuck, they just do the same things.
And also, if both couples aren't committed, like if both partners in the relationship aren't committed to getting unstuck, I would encourage the person that is willing to make that shift, keep the focus on yourself. I think we get stuck when my focus is on Brad and his focus is on what he wants me to do. But if I'm like, okay, Lord, how are you calling me to love my spouse? And that's what I'm going to do. That's a picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And our marriages are to be a picture of Christ in the church. And this is how we put the gospel on display. So,
yeah, and real practically, just write down where we are, where we want to be, and what's our first step to where we want to be, and always taking more steps toward where you desire to be, because it takes that degree of intentionality. And the problem with marriage is a lot of people put a lot of intentionality in a lot of areas in life, health and finances and their work, but then their marriage is just their marriage. But what we want people to do is, my marriage is my most important horizontal relationship in life, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make it life-giving and good.
What if a couple has different faith or they're not Christians? What does grace look like in that kind of a marriage if you're of two different faiths, or does it even matter?
Well, if one's a believer and not a believer, we talk to couples all the time, and you see that where one is, and that's where that person has to just totally know that their hope and their worth and their value comes from the Lord. And then it is, okay, Lord, how are you calling me to love my spouse? And just continue to pray that the Lord would save them, change their heart. Yeah. And if they're in both believers and in different faiths, but it's about Christ, then you can move forward.
Yeah, and also it's just commit to, like Marilyn said, focus on yourself and how I'm going to make our marriage better, and how I'm going to do what I know to be right. Because people find more joy when they're doing what they know to be right between them and the Lord, irrespective of their spouse. So It is difficult. I mean, I don't want to say it doesn't pose challenges when you have two people of different faiths, or one person of faith, one person. It poses real challenges. So you got to give yourself a lot of grace and realize I can't live in just a point of perpetual frustration, and realize my hope is not in my spouse changing. Marriage is not the ultimate source of satisfaction. When people put their whole hope in their spouse changing and becoming what they want to be, oftentimes they end up divorcing, remarrying, and then being stuck in the same problem again.
Okay, well, you know what? It does look like we are unfortunately out of time. It's a really interesting topic that we could go on and on talking about all day. But Brad and Marilyn, thank you so much for joining me today and discussing your personal, marriage there and your book as well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Brad and Marilyn Rhoades are the co-authors of The Grace of Marriage. It's available at www.gracemarriage.com.